Okay, are we live? We're live. Okay, we'll start. We're just dead on, are we? Or whichever clock's telling us. If you're in County Hall, we've got 3 clocks in County Hall in the main chamber, and all of them tell you a different time, which is quite useful at some points. Anyway, welcome to today's meeting of the Cabinet, and we have 10 items on the agenda. So if we can set off on those, and everybody should be refreshed and revitalised and have had their ice creams and chips and fish and chips and stuff like that. Should be all right to go for it. So item 1 is apologies for absence, which we've got Michael Payne, MP. We've got Michelle Welsh, MP. And we've got Viv for personal details. Okay.
Fox.
Sorry?
Catherine Fox.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about Kate. Yeah, she's not there, is she? No. And Catherine, who's got a bad back. So we'll note those down, and also to approve now is item 2, page 5 to 10, is the correct minutes of the meeting held on 17th of July. So I'll move those if we can have a seconders and we're agreed. We are agreed. Declarations of interests, anything that... This is item 3. Anybody wishes to declare any interest? None given. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is the forward plan, that's on page 11 to 17, and we're asked to note that. We agreed? We are agreed, thank you. Moving on to item 5, which it says Tina or Richard on here, so Tina's here, so she's going to do it. It's the Prudential Code Indicated Monitoring 24-25 and Treasury Activity Report for the period 24 to July 24. Sorry, from April 24 to July 24. And it's at this point where your eyes sort of glaze over and think, should have been on the beach now. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you, Leader. I'll try and keep you all awake. So the first report I'm going to present to you today is the Prudential Code Indicator Monitoring and Treasury Activity Report for the period of April to July 2024. So you all know that the minimum requirements for this report is an annual strategy in advance of it being considered by Cabinet and approved by full Council in March, a mid-year review and an annual review. Now, in past years, we've actually brought you quarterly monitoring. However, this year, due to the general election and the dates of Cabinet needing to change, it wasn't possible to bring a first quarter until September. And we thought that, reporting first quarter in September is probably not too timely. So we thought we might as well give you another month. So for a trial basis this year, we're going to be bringing monitoring just 3 times. And that's going to be the periods of April to July, August to November, and December to March. And we'll see how it goes, and then make a decision whether we're going to do that on an ongoing basis. So first thing we'll get cracking on is the economic update. So just bear with me 1 second, because I've just gone down way too far on this. So the economy then, the economic update. In quarter 4 last year, we reported that the economy had improved by about 0.7%. Since then, it has stalled a little. The gross domestic product, GDP, which is a measure of how well the economy is growing, in the 3 months to June, it showed an estimated growth of 0.6%. However, no growth was seen in June or July, so it has stalled a little bit. Looking at inflation, the Consumer Price Index, which measures the cost of living, fell to 2% in June, but it has raised very slightly to 2.2% in July. The core CPI is similar measure, but removes energy and fuel prices, as they can be quite volatile. So sometimes it's a better measure. This fell to 3.5% in June, with a further fall to 3.3% in July. So in response to the fall in inflation, the Bank of England's target rate of 2% was achieved in June. So they responded to this by reducing the interest rates from 5.25% down to 5%. The next review will take place on the 19th of September. They are done every 6 months. It's not likely that it's going to go down again so quickly, but we can hope. In response to inflation falling, as it's fallen, it's reduced overall. Interest rates have gone down, inflation's gone down, but overall the growth in economy has stalled slightly. The tightness in the labour market, whilst overall it continues to ease, it has been a bit sticky since April. However, very recently there's been a very sharp fall in employment and increase in unemployment, which suggests that the wage growth will soon be back on a downwards path. And in addition to that, vacancy data shows that there's a call-in of the labour market as vacancies have actually reduced from 908,000 down to 904,000. So that's a trend that we continue to see, a reduction. So hopefully it means that, we should be seeing more vacancies filled and easier to fill them, which I think we have been doing over the past couple of months. So our Treasury advisors link, they provided with a revised forecast of interest rates, and they are now expecting the peak to be 5%, and they expect this to be this until September 24, and then they see it starting to fall, reaching 4.5% by December, 4% by March 2025, and then they see it reducing down to 3.2% by June 2026. So despite interest rates falling, we continue to get a good rate of return from our investments, and we are currently still optimistic that we can achieve the budgeted 1.1 million for 24-25, which was approved as part of the annual budget setting process. We do, however, acknowledge that this is likely to reduce further in future years, which will put additional pressure on the council's revenue budget, and we will have to take that into consideration when we set budgets for next year and beyond. We will continue to monitor investments, return, and any potential changes outside of which we're forecasting we'll report to you as part of future reports. So if we look at Appendix 1, this sets out the Treasury management activity for April to July. And talks about our investments and where we invest our money. So most of our funds are invested in the money market funds. They're very highly liquid and very secure, AAA investments. There's been no changes to our counterparty limits in July, which remain around £3 million. However, we do have a higher limit of £4 million for money market funds if it's deemed prudent if it's needed. We often tend to invest with the DMO, the Debt Management Office, and we have no limit on the amount we can invest with them. So even if we do reach the top of our counterparty limits, we've always got the DMO that we can invest with, and we're still getting good returns from them currently. So for the period of April to July, we've received £375,000 in interest on our investments, which is an overall equated rate of 5.42%. This is higher than the compound sterling overnight rate, or otherwise known as SONIA, of 5.15%. So basically what that means is that we're investing really well. You'll remember that we have £1 million invested in the CCLA property fund, which is a local government treasury approved scheme. The investment has reduced over the past couple of years, and it has reduced again in the past 4 months by £4,000. So the value is currently sitting at £872,674. But the value is expected to fluctuate because it is a long-term investment, and we've spoken about this in the past. We did receive a dividend of £11,500 for April to June. So whilst it has reduced again, those movements, those reductions, we are seeing they are getting smaller. So we do anticipate that growth will follow within the next year or so. We do monitor this very closely, and we do take advice on this. And the current advice is, yes, you just need to hold your nerve. They will start to go back up. It's been a difficult time for property investments, but they are sound and should still be sound for the longer term. We haven't taken any new borrowing. And we don't anticipate taking any this year. However, now that interest rates are reducing, we might need to consider an optimal time for taking any additional borrowing that might be needed in the medium term. Although we can't borrow in advance of need, we're not allowed to do that. Our capital financing requirement does set out the amount of borrowing that we are likely to need. So we will be looking at that in the forthcoming months to say, you know, what's our optimal time. We've managed to avoid borrowing any money while the interest rates were so high, which is really good. So we will consider that going forward. So Appendix 2 sets out performance against the approved indicators, which are a key measure of affordability. There have been some movements to report and some approvals are required this time. So the Prudential Code for Capital Expenditure, which was set in March 24, has been exceeded. However, this is only due to carry forwards of the deferred capital schemes from 23-24 capital programme. So this report requests approval to increase that indicator from 9.388 million up to 9.872 million. It's important to note that all of these deferrals have previously been approved to go in the capital programme, and there was also approved carry forwards at the outturn report for at 23-24. The second indicator which needs to be increased is the ratio of financing costs to the net revenue stream. This is an increase which is due to the original budget for our minimum revenue provision. The report requests an increase from 2.21% to 3.85%, and it's due to changes in financing of the capital programme. And this is mainly because we had a phased capital receipt for the sale of land, which is coming to an end, which means that more borrowing is potentially required. However, whilst we're asking for this indicator to be increased, it is important to note that actually it could reduce over the coming months if we see some additional and future capital receipts. So if we sell some additional pieces of land, or if we're selling these scrap vehicles that are in excess of £10,000. So basically, it just means that we're increasing it because we need to be we want to be prudent and ensure that we have adequate provision in the revenue budget to cover the costs of our borrowing. Thank you, Leader. That's all I want to say on that report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you. David.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks for the report, Tina. Can I just say, from my point of view, I'm quite happy to have this 3 times a year rather than 4 times a year, providing it's compliant with SIPFA, of course. It's not a question, mine's more of a comment. I think it's a report that's really in 2 parts. You know, the first part, paragraph 2.1, is not very optimistic about the economy, with unemployment rising and wage growth going down. But the second part, the meat of the report, it demonstrates that sound management of our finances. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Is no one else? Can I just ask, you know that £1 million we invested and we've got less, you know, it's 11,000 or it's dropped. At any point in the future, if we really hit the rocks, can we just pull out what we've got left in that fund?
Yes, we can pull out. We have that option.
Just lose that.
Yeah, but we would lose the amount that it's gone down by. However, you know, we do receive about £44,000 worth of dividends every year from it. So we've currently gained more in dividends than what we've lost in value. It's property. It's very, very rare that property depreciates over a long period of time. We do expect it to appreciate, and we do expect it to go up. So we do just need to hold our nerves. I think that would be the advice that would be given.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't. We wanted to get rid of it. I just wondered if we could pull it out, whether
that is an option.
Something attached to it where it actually, you know, whether you've got to forfeit this, forfeit that, before you can do anything. A bit like car insurance.
Yeah, there's a minimum amount of time it has to. Sorry, there's a minimum amount of time it has to be in. But I think we've exceeded that now. But I will check for you.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Then move on to page 19, which is the recommendations. We're asked to note the report. That's at item 1 and 2 to approve the changes to the prudential indicators. I'll move it. Seconded, and we're agreed. So that's dealt with, and we're still with you on item 6, which is budget monitoring and environment report for the period April to July 24. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Leader. So this report is the Budget Monitoring Report and Environment Report for April to July 2024. Again, it is a 4-monthly one. We're following suit with all our monitoring this year. And another benefit of doing it this way, it gives finance a bit more resource to be able to do some really deep dives into some current budget issues that we're looking at and considering. This is a key decision, and there is a number of approvals required for environments, use of reserves and changes to the capital programme. So if we first of all look at our revenue budget, and we look at our approved budget of 14.937 million, which was approved by full council in March 24. There have been some movements during the first 4 periods. However, currently we are still reporting a balanced outturn position as at July. Now, last year we reported some significant overspends in the Environment Department. So Finance are currently working with managers to assess the budgetary requirements to enable us to deliver those services, and we're carrying out a zero-based budget exercise. Because we don't believe that the historical incremental budgets have taken into consideration changes and increases in service demand, especially around our waste services. Which has led to an increased reliance on agency staff, which is a way more costly provision. So the first 4 months of 2024-25 have seen overspends in this department, and these are likely to continue until we have completed this piece of work. Normally we would forecast a position as at the end of the year and amend budgets accordingly for any over and underspends through the monitoring process. However, as this piece of work is ongoing, we feel that it's only prudent at this point in time to increase the budgets for the overspend incurred to the end of July. By next period, or the next reporting period of monitoring, we will have a much better understanding of what the base budget needs to be to enable that service delivery. And then we can look to bring proposals to you regarding the budget and whether we need to increase it, and if so, how much by. So although we are reporting a balanced budget, it is likely to change in the coming months. And I will just say that the work that is being undertaken is really, really resource intensive. It requires a considerable amount of data being available from the service area. So we are prioritising waste and fleet in the first instance, because this is where we've seen the most significant overspends. We'll look at the remaining elements of environment like PASC and schedule those in for a similar review at some point in the future. So major variances that we're actually looking at to July is additional staffing costs in the waste services due to the extension of temporary posts and agency staff of £51,000. Agency staff costs and overtime in fleet services of £32,000, and some depot repairs that were not able to be capitalised because they didn't meet the criteria of £27,000. We have been able to offset these by additional income, one of those being additional lease income at the Richard Herod Centre of £24,000. We've had some additional income from our share of the solar farm energy of £40,000, and some additional income generated by financial services of £11,000. So this income, as I say, it has enabled the offsetting of the above overspends for the first 4 months, but we will be needing to probably come to you at some point in the future to probably amend budgets for the remainder of the year. Saying that though, if we think about the pay award, the council included a sum of £930,000 in the budget based on an assumption of a £1,925 pay award, which has been historical over the past couple of years. That's the amount that's been awarded. The national employers have proposed a final increase this year of £1,290. Whilst that hasn't been agreed yet or accepted, it does feel like it's probably not going to move too much from that. So if that were to be accepted, it would give us an underspend of around about £300,000 in our budget. So we may then be able to offset some additional overspends with that amount, and we just have to wait to see when that is agreed. So moving on to the efficiency programme, for 24-25 we have a programme, an approved programme of £406,200 plus deferrals from the 23-24 programme of £427,000, given an overall delivery target for this financial year of £833,200. There has been some deferrals proposed to go to 25-26, and these again are around the Environment Department and some of the work that we need to be doing in there. So it's staffing reviews in PASC and waste, service reviews and round optimisations. We've deferred part year efficiencies, and we'll continue to monitor those because, as I said, there's a lot of work being undertaken in the Environment Agency. and a recent restructure that's happened. So in addition, we're requesting £11,000 to be removed completely from the efficiency programme, which is due to historical fees and charges increases, which can no longer be delivered for various reasons. This leaves a revised delivery expected in the current year of £775,900. The amendments that we're asking, the deferrals that we're asking approval for, will be funded in year by the budget risk provision, so will not contribute to in-year overspends. So basically, we every year we set out a budget risk provision for this purpose, just in case we can't deliver all of our efficiencies, or if we have some unforeseen circumstances pop up in the budget. The MTFP also, as you'll remember, set out an efficiency requirement of 3.599 million for the medium term. This includes the 834,000 that we've talked about above, and a further 500,000 is expected from efficiencies from digital transformation work that's currently being undertaken. So this actually leaves 2.225 million of efficiencies that need to be found in the medium term by 28-29 in order to maintain a balanced budget position. So new proposals will be generated with the leader and the deputy leader and the portfolio holders over the coming months as part of the budget process, and will be presented for consideration and approval at a later date. The capital programme, we have an approved budget of 9.388 million, which was approved in March, plus carry forwards from the previous financial year of 2.364 million. So that gives us a current approved programme of just over 12 million, because we've also had approvals in the first 4 months of schemes totalling £328,000. So as I said, there's a number of proposed additions to the capital programme and other amendments, and they're detailed in the table in your packs on page 40, which we are requesting approval for. This gives if accepted, this will give a revised programme of 9.8 million. So significant amendments to the capital programme include the reduction of the window replacement programme at the Civic Centre. So it has been reviewed, and only those windows that cannot be repaired will now be replaced. So this has actually resulted in a reduction of £100,000. That was funded by borrowing, so it just means it's less borrowing that we need to take out. And also the removal of the Salix decarbonisation project. And that's been removed, and you might recall some of this, that after analysis the project was deemed to be not value for money due to the reductions in grant funding that was actually available. We're taking a bit of a pause on that and considering future decarbonisation projects, and these are being considered in the context of the council's overall asset management plans, and they'll be brought forward in the future for your consideration. So whilst we've had quite some significant removals from the capital programme, it should be noted that in line with financial regulations, underspends on capital projects and removals from the capital programme cannot just be transferred to other capital projects. Any new capital projects must each be considered and approved according to financial regulations and in their own right. The financing of the capital programme is predominantly through borrowing, 45%, and grants at 40%, and this is shown in the chart on page 41 of your packs. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great, thank you. So back to page 35, any questions? Marge?
Not so much a question as a comment. I'm really pleased that you're going to move to that zero-based budget for environmental services. I thought it might be useful to say for the general public that we can never remove agency staff, because that is something that people always ask about when they look at the high cost and the overspend within our budget, because we can't afford to carry spare staff, and that's what the agency budget is for. But what we do need is to calculate the need for that staff better. It has to cover sick pay, which is very difficult to calculate in environment services, because the work is heavy and it leads to quite a lot of injury and sometimes long-term sick. But it also covers holiday pay and things like that, that I know we could calculate better from the staffing we have. So I'm optimistic that our budgeting will be better next year when we've done this deep dive. So thank you very much for doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't remove the agency budget, and there is a calculation that we do that looks at the cover that's needed on the bank holiday and over the Christmas, because obviously we do have to empty bins regardless of holidays and sickness and annual leave. And there is a provision for agency, but I think what is happening is that we're needing to pull in more agency because we don't have sufficient staff to cover the core elements for the work that we need to do, and that's part of the work that we're currently doing.
I'm very pleased that elsewhere in our reports today, it's mentioned about the HGV training programme that we've introduced. I'm optimistic that that could help alleviate some of our problems in recruitment. Can't promise it, but it may. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Great explanation that about the, because a lot of people think, oh, you just hire people, but, you know, we're working on a shoestring and we can't have these people that are sat on shelves waiting to come out, can we? So that's sensible budgeting. So there are no more comments. On page 35, we've got 3 recommendations. Approve general fund budget environments. 2 is note the use of the reserves and funds from April to July 24, and 3, approve the changes to the capital programme, including paragraph 2.4. So I'll move those, if we can second and agree. We are agreed. Thank you. Now we're moving away from you, Tina. We're moving on to the Gedling plan, which David Archer's going to do it. But just before I do that, is this your last meeting, David? So we've got you. Well, anyway, thank you for. I've often said that, you know, about political opposition, etc. You've got on all sides of this council. In most cases, there's a Gedling thrust. You know, they put the politics to one side, and it's the same with the staff as well. And David's done loads and loads of years of work for us in all sorts of different things. And I'll just say thank you for that as a public record now. And I'll hand over to you to introduce the. Gedling, where are we? Gedling plan, that's it.
Yep, thank you, Leader. So it's always been my privilege over the last couple of years to present to you the quarter 4 year-end report, which, without sounding sort of getting too excited about it, it's a real joy to be able to remind you what you as members have achieved, what officers have achieved. It's a real highlight for me. Quarter 1 is probably a bit of a bump back down to earth, really, I suppose, isn't it? It's, the report talks about I suppose, early warnings and flagging up issues where we're moving away from PIs and actions. To be honest with you, quarter 1 really is setting the scene, I think. It's early days in a lot of these sort of things. That said, I mean, spoilers, there are some great things I can tell you about in a second, and we'll come on to that. But just covering things on page 62 in terms of actions, you'll see there the... probably a fairly meaningless pie chart, I suppose. So what it says is that 96 actions still currently active, which we're working towards. Well, you'd kind of expect that in quarter 1, really. No great surprise there. 5 things that have been completed. You'll see the list at the bottom of page 62. So the annual report, I've just spoken about that. We've completed that and publicised that widely. A couple of things that came to this committee on the 17th of July. So that was one of them. And also the council productivity plan, you'll remember, that was introduced by the Chief Executive. We have ensured compliance with the Election Act changes by updating staff. We've carried out a review of our induction process, so the experience that new starters have with us, we've reviewed that as well to try to make that enriched and slightly more meaningful as well. And also investing in the CCTV in our hotspots around the borough. So some things already achieved, lots of things in train. On to page 63, in terms of indicators, again, really early days. 30 indicators, 17 on target or above, 4 slightly below, and 1 missed the target. We missed the target really at the Bonington Theatre. The target attendance rate was 12,000. We got to about 9,500. It seems that there weren't quite enough blockbusters, I don't think, in the film industry in the first quarter. So hoping for a better range of films maybe, and to help swell the numbers. It would seem that that was some of the reason for that reduced attendance. So, item 2.4 on page 64, probably some of the things I wanted to highlight. So some of the headlines you'll recognise from that year-end report. Some of these things are here again at Q1. But, starting from the top, I guess, so in terms of visits to leisure centres, that's 12% above target we're achieving there. And there are so many reasons why that's good. I mean, financially it's good, isn't it? But in terms of our other ambitions to be a healthy borough and to encourage healthy lifestyles, that really is a great outturn. A little bit further down, in terms of business rate collection, 10% above our anticipated rates of collection. Net additional homes provided, 117 was the target, 126 delivered. And then perhaps linked, I suppose, in terms of the housing issue, down to the bottom of that table, number of long-term empty homes in the borough returned to use as a result of our intervention. 200% more than the target. It's fantastic. I mean, again, we're not talking about teams of hundreds of people doing this. It's ones and twos people, and the difference that makes. So for me, again, it's just a real joy to see that sort of outturn. Complaints and compliments. So at the top of page 65. Q1, 19% more compliments, but 46% more complaints than in Q4. And of the complaints, 48% were upheld. So that's like a large number for me, a large proportion. And I think probably would want to see perhaps us doing better there. In terms of proportion of complaints, probably a couple of things really stand out. One is missed bins. Come on to that in a second. And secondly, it's really complaints to do with grass and long grass mowing, particularly in cemeteries. It's a big deal. So when you speak to people who know about grass mowing, they'll tell you that this year it's been particularly bad. It's been sort of wet and quite warm. The grass really has done what it's supposed to do, I guess, which is to grow a lot. The downside is, of course, we only have limited resources to deal with that. So that has been something that people have seen and been unhappy about. In terms of things like missed bins, you'll understand that we are now working hard to bring in a waste management system out to procurement for a new system. Currently, we are using quite simple ways of trying to manage and monitor collection of bins and missed bins. Going forwards, we hope for huge differences that we can make in terms of our efficiency, in terms of the way that we manage information dynamically. So we would provide a much better service. That is our ambition. Achievements are 2.7. Just a couple of things, I guess, just to point out. Some of them have already been covered, but in terms of housing strategy, we're out for consultation shortly. And again, the strategy is designed to look at the trends and pressures within the borough, and including an action plan to deal with those emerging priorities. A new health studio at Carlton Forum. That's in there as well. The Arnold Summer Fair, so a very different sort of event perhaps to things we might have run in the past, but again a great way to try to, I suppose, do things in a perhaps more targeted way. So you'll see in the summary there at the bottom of page 65 that sort of diversity inclusion were a strong theme there, and in terms of the mural address, that strong message about the contribution of immigrant, migrant and refugee communities to our wider community. So a great chance to do the things we want to do. So just finishing off on just a couple of things there. So Ambition Arnold consultation commenced, and you'll be aware obviously of the Carlton long-term plan for towns, the £20 million over a 10-year horizon, and the appointment of Sir John Peace as the independent chair for that Greater Carlton Town Board as well. So lots of good things. So despite me saying Q1 might be slightly less exciting than year end, there's so much there that we're working on and achieving as well. So that's probably all I was going to say, Leader. Just returning to the recommendations on page 61.
Thanks, David. Any comments? What two? Either or?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to the leisure team again in terms of the performance here. It's absolutely outstanding in terms of the number of visits that we're getting to the leisure centres, and that can only be a really good thing for the borough in terms of health and wellbeing outcomes. The other thing I'd like to highlight on there is the empty homes that have been returned to use. That's absolutely, it's really good success there. I'd like to say a big thank you to the officer that works there to bring those homes back into use. That's 54 empty homes that would have gone to rack and ruin had they not been brought back into use, and I'm sure they're going to be used for families that desperately need those. Thank you.
Yes, certainly echo what Councillor Wheeler's just said, particularly about the empty homes. I won't praise the officer too much because I do it every time, and I don't want her to get the other staff to get jealous. I just want to say thanks to every member of staff when you look at these figures and the work that they put in to achieve this, and the commitment they have to this council is just, it's outstanding, as to use a word that Councillor Payne MP would use. It's outstanding. So thank you to everybody who helps us to achieve these incredible results.
Thank you. Anyone else? It certainly proves, as we say many times, that staff go the extra mile, and that shows in the things here. And some of these things that are perhaps behind a little bit, we'll move forward. I think perhaps just to say something on the final one, David, the Carlton Town Plan for towns. There's a lot of work for those that are listening to this, and it'll only be a few, I know, but we need to get the message out. There is a lot of work going off in the background, and it's not full of politicians, it's 25 people, no one gets paid on there, and we're taking time to put a plan forward. Excuse me, the election got in the way a bit, so that slowed it down, but it has moved forward, and just really, there will be a plan there. It's whether there's any, because all sorts of things were promised before the last election, it's whether the £20 million fund is actually there, and I think that's key. Now, there was two questions at the last meeting we had. Do we stop doing it until we know that money's there, or do we carry on? And I think we made the correct decision, it was unanimous, that we carry on, at least if it does start in some form, reduce money or whatever, then we've got the plan ready. And we're shovel ready is the word you have to say in this environment, ready to get on and do it. But no, thank you for that. We've got a recommendation, as David says, somewhere, I'll find it. It's on page 61. Yeah. And that's progress against improvement actions and performance indicators 23, 27, getting plan for the end of quarter, and it's all just to be noted. So we'll move that, seconded, and we are agreed. Thank you. Now, here we come, Star Act. Now, where's Sam? You all right, Sam? Welcome. You're going to talk to us about selective licence and implementation of Phase 1A in Netherfield Ward. So we'll listen to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So the report's on page 113 of the agenda pack. The purpose of the report is to consider the results of the 12-week public consultation from the 15th of December 2023 through to the 10th of March 24. And it's in relation to a proposal to designate a Phase 1A selective licensing scheme in the Netherfield Ward for a period of up to 5 years. It is a key decision, the reason being because it affects the private rented sector in the borough, and the income from the scheme could exceed the key decision threshold if additional income is received during the scheme. The previous scheme that ran from 2018 in Netherfield was also a key decision. I'll come back to the recommendations on the report later. There are a number of approvals in order to authorise the implementation of the scheme. The background of the report sets out following a successful pilot in Netherfield between 2018 and 2023, where 709 homes were licensed by the council, and within these we found 80% of properties inspected were found to require essential works under the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, and 53 of those properties were found as having disrepair presenting an imminent risk. So we worked with landlords to improve those properties, and certainly with the imminent risk properties, the potentially life-saving interventions that have been carried out, particularly in relation to sort of excess cold hazards and fire safety hazards. We've worked with landlords to put in heating systems, insulation, and ensure that a safe means of escape and safe fire detection to protect tenants in those properties. Over the course of the scheme, the associated data has shown a 29% in reduction of complaints about housing conditions in the last year of the scheme, a 30% reduction in complaints about antisocial behaviour between the peak in 2019 and the final year of the scheme, and then crime data collated by the police showed a peak in 2020 and then a 30% reduction in dwelling crime seen in the area. The proposal to designate the selective licensing scheme sits within the powers available to councillors where the government criteria has been satisfied. So the Phase 1A proposal review that was subject to the consultation sets out the case and demonstrates that a number of conditions have been satisfied. Only one of these conditions needs to be satisfied to introduce the scheme, but the review document sets out that there's a significant and persistent problem caused by antisocial behaviour, there are poor property conditions, high levels of deprivation and high levels of crime. The proposal was subject to a 12-week public consultation and 43 responses were received. They're set out in the background section of the report. Some in favour of the scheme, some less positive in terms of the scheme. But the responses, each response that's been received has been gone through and they're presented in Appendix 3 to the report. And we've set out how the issues that have been raised have been taken into account and acted on or not. Some of the comments shown in the report relate around the fees of the scheme. So following the consultation, a number of amendments to the scheme are proposed and they're set out in the financial implications of the report. The proposal links to recommendations and proposes that Cabinet designate a scheme from the 5th of January 2025. The financial implications are set out in the report. The fees are shown in, they're collected in two parts as shown in Table 1A. We're proposing to offer an enhanced discount for accredited landlords who voluntarily seek accreditation to develop their knowledge, skills and experience in property management via an accreditation body who can provide access to a network of support and information. Accredited landlords agree to meet minimum standards set out in the accreditation schemes within a voluntary code, and these can be above minimum legal standards. So the proposed discount for accredited landlords is £195 for new landlords and £200 for landlords who relicense their property with the council from the previous scheme, and those discounts compared to landlords who are non-accredited. As a result of feedback to the consultation, a new fee is recommended in Table 1B, offering a discount for landlords who relicense their properties with the council. So these are for landlords that were licensed under Phase 1 and come back to the council for relicensing, and their property management arrangements have not changed and there's not been significant issues with non-compliance in the properties. We're proposing a relicense fee discount of £55 for accredited landlords and £50 for non-accredited landlords. So that's set out in the financial implications. Cabinet are recommended to note the financial and staffing implications set out in the report. In terms of the legal implications, before reaching a decision, Cabinet must be satisfied that the statutory tests have been satisfied and the Secretary of State's guidance has been followed. Under Section 80 of the Act, there's a statutory requirement to take all reasonable steps to consult people who are likely to be affected by the designation. So we promoted the scheme, or the consultation, far and wide. Leaflets were delivered to every home in Netherfield. There were articles in Contacts, press releases were issued. We also wrote to all of the landlords who registered their properties under the previous scheme to make them aware of the consultation and the intention to, or the proposal to designate a further scheme. As mentioned, the results of the consultation are summarised in Appendix 3. An equalities impact assessment has been carried out, and that's set out in Appendix 4. Although not a protected characteristic, private tenants have less ability to improve their own housing conditions and rely on the landlord and public sector for support and improvements in their living conditions. Selective licensing is a tool that enables the council to legally require landlords to apply for a licence, and in doing so introduces minimum standards to improve housing conditions. The scheme will have a positive impact on protected characteristic groups from an equalities perspective, as regulation of the private rented sector will help improve living conditions and ensure best practice. Rogue landlords who take advantage of vulnerable tenants will either need to comply with their legal obligations or move out of the sector. Selective licensing is a mechanism that increases the enforcement powers of the council to protect vulnerable residents. In terms of carbon reduction and sustainability implications, assessment's been carried out in Appendix 5. The scheme will ensure that rented properties meet minimum energy efficiency standards, include adequate insulation and heating systems. This will contribute to reduced carbon emissions associated with the private rented housing in Netherfield. Without designating selective licensing in Netherfield, the council's ability to improve energy efficiency in the private rented sector would be significantly reduced. In terms of the reasons for the recommendation, ultimately this report is a choice for Cabinet, weighing up the implications of the scheme, deciding whether to introduce a scheme or not. The proposal is to introduce a scheme that will come into force from the 5th of January next year. If introduced, the scheme will be kept under regular review and subject to ongoing progress and performance monitoring. Selective licensing is an important tool and component in the council's strategy to improve housing conditions in the private rented sector in Netherfield, Carlton Hill, Colic, Daybrook and Newstead Village. It's the only option available to local authorities that compels landlords to look at how they manage their rented properties and, where required, make improvements in their management practices. It's important that this scheme will support the council and partners in improving the physical environment and economic conditions in the areas. The scheme will allow the council to support landlords to comply with addressing damp and mould hazards. Awab Ishak was a child that sadly passed away in Rochdale due to the coroner determined that it was due to poor living conditions. He acquired a respiratory illness linked to damp and mould in the property. Law was brought in for social landlords in 2023, requiring landlords to deal with damp and mould hazards in social housing, and it's anticipated that further recommendations will be brought in for the private rented sector. Having selective licensing in place helps us to regulate those hazards and help protect tenants from the health impacts from poor quality housing. So that's the end of the presentation. The recommendations are on page 114 of the pack. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sam. Just following David in again is to thank you for the effort that's gone into this and to David as portfolio holder, because the resistance at the start was quite strong and there will be resistance still there. But what we've done, we've possibly saved lives here. There's no doubt in that. You know, this is a good scheme to do. And I look at the recent thing with the MP last week, who got 15, 16 properties in London, left it with an agency, probably had no idea what those places were like. That was an investment to him. But this would tighten all those types of things up. And I think, you know, to pass on to you and to whoever else has been involved and to David's portfolio, our particular thanks, because everyone was nervous at the start and then now it's worked out well, and I think we should proceed with it. David.
Thanks, Leader. I'd echo that, and I'd thank Sam and the team for the report. The report systematically and thoroughly takes us through the issues that we've got to consider if we decide to designate. And to my mind, the case is proven. The conditions are satisfied. Phase 1 has been a success in improving housing conditions, addressing antisocial behaviour, and as Sam says, in some cases, making life-saving interventions. But the job isn't finished, so we need to continue. It's gone on for 4 or 5 years. It's going to continue now. I took part in the consultation, and there were 2 main suggestions for the operation of the scheme. One was a renewal rather than a relicensing fee, and the second one was whether it would roll on past 5 years. Now, I know there's been lots of discussions between Sam and with legal colleagues and finance colleagues around the scheme, and it's the nature of the scheme, nature of the legislation, that it has to be self-financing and that it lasts for the life of the designation. But there, as Sam pointed out, there's been some efforts made to trim some of the edges and make some savings where possible. So some of the costs have been paid back. When we started out on this in 2018, and every time we've done consultations since then, there have basically been two fears expressed. One, that landlords would leave the sector, and there's no evidence of that at all. There's no evidence of reduction in the number of rented houses. And secondly, that the cost will be passed on to tenants. Well, we know there have been increase in rents across the borough, indeed across the country. But if you remember, between 2018 and 2023, we had the cost of living crisis. We've had COVID. We had Truss's mini budget, and which crashed the economy. So you can't say that selective licensing has been responsible for increasing rents. What we can say is it's been responsible for improving conditions in the area and making Netherfield a better place to live. We know there's needs in Netherfield, and as Sam says, this is one way of addressing part of those needs, and I'm quite happy to support it. Thank you.
Very much. Anybody else? Is there anyone else? Just say those people that we've met that had the insulation on the walls and things like that, the massive difference to them, because I can remember working on some of those houses and they were so damp. When you put it, and you were trying to do the electrics on it, they were all shorted out because the walls were that damp. But they've all passed positive comments back. Yeah, there's some interference in doing it, but got to make the omelette without breaking the egg, can it? So, in general, I think it's gone down very well. And to support these, we've got, where are we, page 114. 5 recommendations there. I'm not going to read them all out because there's quite a lot of them, but basically approve everything that's in your report and David's report. So we'll move those. And we seconded. Agreed. Thank you very much. And we'll move it on. I think we're heading to the end of it now. Is this Mike? You've got a quick update on the policy advisors on page 155.
Thank you, Leader. A very quick update. So this is a periodic report that provides an update on the actions and activities that the policy advisors have undertaken since the last report to Cabinet way back in February 2023. Originally, as the report sets out, there were 5 policy advisor positions created at the annual general meeting back in May 2019, 5 years ago. However, with a number of changes over the last 5 years, the policy advisor roles have changed. And that leaves us now currently with 2 positions, the Policy Advisor for Vulnerable Communities and the Policy Advisor for Environmental Services Operations. The Policy Advisors do play an important role for the Council, and they are expected to undertake research and fact-finding on behalf of the portfolio holders, expected to understand how decisions are made and feedback on those, expected to attend regular meetings with the portfolio holders and senior managers and members of the senior leadership team, and again, feedback any updates, ideas and concerns raised by anybody as appropriate. So, as I say, Leader, a very quick report. The actions and activities for each policy advisor over the last 18 months are set out in the report in paragraph 1.9. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? No comments? Move the recommendation.
Just a very quick comment to say I really welcome the support that I get from my policy advisor, spotting things that I might miss, and it's really useful having that extra eye. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move the recommendation. Seconded. We agreed? We are agreed. Thank you. And I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. There's no any other items that we consider urgent, and thank everybody for attending. Thank you.